partner, Tony Miltenberger, is not able to be with us today, but he will be watching because I'm super excited to have the guest that we are on today. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody hops on Tony's YouTube page, follow the lead. Tony is one of the best executive coaches out there. And if you believe that there is a need in your business where you need some guidance or coaching, I think that you need to go to him. He has been a mentor to me and the entire time that him and I have been together. It was a friendship, but it's been more of a mentorship. I'm really happy to have today our guest, and I think you guys are going to be pretty pleased. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Alex Hague is co-owner of Vandalia Range and Armory. He's co-founder of Evolve Range Solutions. Alex is a longtime firearms industry leader, range owner, and innovator with nearly 2 decades of experience operating NSFF, only one F at the end, NSFF 5-star facilities, including Vandalia Range and Armory. After years of dealing with outdated technology, high maintenance cost, and declining shooter engagement, he co-founded Evolve Range Solutions to modernize rangers from an owner's perspective. Evolve's flagship EVR target system blends real firearms and ammunition with interactive attachment-free targets that react, score, and entertain. Since 2018, it has helped ranges cut maintenance cost, boost lane engagement, and attract new shooters through immersive tech-driven experiences. Alex continues to run his own ranges. He understands what owners value most: reliability, profitability, and memorable customer experiences. Evolve now offers a full ecosystem, including the EV secure displays, EV check-in kiosks, range development consulting, to help modern ranges stay effective. Today, he applies these principles at Vandalia Range and Armory, where I have been a customer before. I learned about this early on talking with his dad, and I was very impressed. Alex, that's quite a bio. I fumbled several words. Thank you for being here, even though I just can't seem to speak the English language today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, the first question I want to ask you is, man, in the marketplace today, so the business owners that are watching us right now are dealing with market challenges. They may not all be technology. They may not need to revamp a product, but they're dealing with something right here, right now. When did you guys first recognize at Vandalia Range and Armory that something's got to change?
I would say probably in that 2018 area. We started to come on with a lot of maintenance and a lot of issues with the current range equipment and stuff we had. And we also started to look at what generations were coming up. We saw a lot of younger people, even people our age that, have been around technology, have used technology. And we started to see, how could we implement this into the range, and how could we make it not just entertaining, because that is important, and fun, but we also wanted to bring that training and that experience to people. So, when we develop everything or we bring something new, we keep the interests of the customer in mind, but also, knowing that firearms are serious and that training is serious, and we want people to improve their shooting and keep track of that kind of stuff. So, really it kind of over time, we just saw a progression of, we're getting high maintenance costs with this, and we need to look at something new. And then we're seeing younger generations coming up, and we want to kind of fill that gap.
Well, I want to point out something brilliant, and I apologize that I don't recall if it was you that shared this tidbit with me or if it was your dad. But in a conversation, one of you guys told me dads have always brought their kids to the range because they wanted them to share in the legacy of Second Amendment and owning firearms and doing it safely. But one of you recognized that kids are already involved in technology. They're already playing games like Valorant. They're already playing games like Call of Duty. And one of you guys identified to me that some of the kids that came in with their parents were able to identify some of the firearms that you guys currently stock and what type of ammunition they use better than their parents, even though they were rookie or novice level firearms. That's a pretty incredible observation to make. How did it jump from you making that observation? As business owners, we make observations in our business all the time. A lot of us aren't wise enough or don't see the entry point to go, man, that kid's onto something. What was it right there that kind of nudged you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I give my dad credit on that. That I think that's his story. So I'll give him full credit on that. But from our perspective, we looked at our industry as being a little archaic. There hadn't been a lot of change, over the years. The biggest change was, having something that was a stationary target to something that ran back and forth. And, with the technology that was out there, we just thought that there's probably a need. And if we can fulfill it, giving people a little bit more to do than just shoot at paper targets. We wanted to give them the opportunity to shoot bowling pins that knock over, or games that walk you through different levels that you can shoot and improve on, and it keeps your score and you can track your data. And so we started to see that kind of early, but then, as we started to implement this and we were getting feedback like that, it kind of gelled that we felt like we were in the right direction.
Man, I give you a ton of credit. I'm getting ready to have a guest on here on the first Monday of May, Charlie McMahon. He's a lead pastor at the church that I go to, Southbrook Christian Church. And I kind of think what you guys did and what he did, his thought was players box, engaging athletes, kids involved in academics and kids involved in arts, engaging them where they were at, and really trying to be the blockade at the top of the cliff and stop something bad from happening instead of being the triage ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. It was brilliant the way that he took that technology and rolled it into, you can call it youth ministry, or you can just call it really filling a gap. I commend you guys. Business owners see things that come along in their business. This one right here has come along like a whirlwind. And some people have asked you guys how you did that, and you guys have found out a way to monetize that by teaching other range owners. Was it your idea first to reach out, or did people start reaching out to you and say, Alex, what in the world are you guys doing there?
No, it was always a goal. We did take our time before we took it to market. We really wanted to test it out and see how, our customers responded to it, and, what kind of data we got back. And then also we wanted to make sure that we weren't putting something out there that was going to have a lot of issues or a lot of troubleshooting. And that was what we wanted to get away from. Our biggest push, and maybe kind of our biggest advantage, is that we're range owners. So when we design or build anything, or any idea we've come up with on this whole system, was, can it be put into a commercial range, and can it be operated as a commercial range owner operates, which we have that experience, and a lot of range companies or a lot of other companies really don't have that hands-on experience. So, instead of just putting something out there and hoping that it works, we really took our time and made sure that it was a fluent system. So we patented, our downrange roller system that's on a key switch, which pulls the paper, which allows us to, keep a clean target, and you don't have to recalibrate. And then as customers come in, they can continue to shoot and have a clean surface to shoot on. Ended up being something that has gone further than we expected, because that was kind of a block with other technologies out there. If the next customer came in and their screen was full of bullet holes, they didn't get that same experience. Or if they came in and somebody had to come in and recalibrate it, now you've got extra personnel going out there that have to go recalibrate it or fix it. And we wanted to get away from that. We wanted the customer to come in, and we wanted our guys, they're not all tech savvy. We wanted them to be able to turn the computers on and the system's ready to go. So, we kind of filled that need as we went. And once we kind of felt comfortable with that, and we saw that it was working, and I realized I wasn't having a lot of maintenance, because I was, probably the person that would go out and have to check everything. Then we started to really promote and push that to ranges. And, luckily we got a few in Ohio to start. So those were short travel trips. And then, since then we've just continued to grow, and, we've moved into several places now, and, we've got a few more on the book. So, we're just pushing. It's one of those things that's never ending. And another advantage is we do our own development. So we try to push new features, new targets. we try to get feedback from the customers, on what ideas or what data they like to see, and then we try to bring that to market as efficiently as possible.
Well, I tell you, I can only imagine that inside, let's just stay inside Vandalia Range and Armory for a minute. So you and your dad and your brothers and all the staff there see this start to grow and really start to gain excitement. It probably impacted the culture that you have there because there's two things. There's this immense sense of pride of, boy, we've really created something that's really cool. But you mentioned some employees might not be as tech savvy. You figured out a way to bridge that gap. What was the key when you were trying to build this into your culture where everybody was excited about it? Because you see business owners all the time. You do a lot of business to business commerce, and you see business owners that have this grandiose idea, this dream, pie in the sky thing, and trying to sell it to their staff is difficult. What
Hmm.
was the key in kind of getting that built into your culture where everybody was as excited about it as you are?
Probably just consistency and being hands-on. I tried, when we bring new people in, it was, walking them through the system, telling them how to, manage things. If they saw certain things that were happening, how to adjust, some of that stuff, and then getting, just constantly trying to feed them, hey, these are the new targets we have, or did you know you could do this, or, show the customers these features. And over time, I think now that we've had it in Vandalia for 7 or 8 years now, some of the employees that are applying for jobs on that have seen it and they're interested in working with it. And so it's kind of maybe brought in some guys that are more tech savvy, even of all ages. We even some of our, our order range officers enjoy working on that side more than some of the other guys. So, it's just over time getting the right people in place. We have a manager, we work with him and he relays the messages and, trying to stay on top of it, asking them for feedback. I think staying engaged with them is always a big thing. If you want your customers to buy into it, you want them to feel like they're being heard and that, the stuff they're giving back to you is important, and so if I'm asking them, hey, we're pushing out an update, can you keep an eye on, these 3 or 4 things? And if you see an issue, to relay it back to me. I think, them coming to me and letting me know if they see an issue and then we can go out and fix it, gives them a little more sense of belonging with it, and they start to understand a little bit better. But over time, it's just being hands-on. And if I saw something, I'd walk out and I'd let them know, hey, this is, if you see this is what you have to do. And it took, there takes some transition periods for sure, but if you're bought in and the store's bought in and the family's bought in and everybody else realizes that that's your system, that's what you're going to offer. It's no different than the company that offers golf simulators, or it's not. They have to understand how to use those. It's not real golf. So it's just constant being consistent and trying to boost them up and teach them the right way.
I love the parallel that you made there, golf simulator being the same with firearms. It really is. And that's an industry that has really exploded. I hear you say something that really has been a common thread in all of the episodes that we've did. The business owners that we have on almost echoed, almost to a word, scary. People could accuse us of planning language and telling people they have to talk about bullet points, but boy, your communication was not just right out directly to the customer. The importance for communication with you guys was with your staff. It was with your customers that came to the range, but also your customers that were other ranges. Communication really seemed to be a big piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, even on the Evolve side, I would say I look at any range we install as important as mine, because they're getting the same feedback. I tell people, we're the only range company that's also range owners, so their expectations are my expectations. I don't want people to come in and have a bad experience based on something not working properly, or someone not guiding them the right way. So our the companies we've dealt with, I mean, I stay in constant communication with them. We can log in remotely, and if they get new staff, we tell them all the time, if they need a training lesson, they want me to walk them through them, I'm happy to do so. When we reload paper or we reload sales or anything like that, I'm always available to help them out. Troubleshooting issues, if they have questions, we're available. So that's always been a huge goal, because we always felt that was lacking in the industry anyways, because once people get past a warranty period or whatever, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of someone. But we know that we're always going to be pushing new updates. We're always going to be pushing new features. I mean, even customers, I've had a couple customers reach out, and they'll say, "Hey, I played this game, but I noticed it didn't do this," and I'll be like, "Hey, give me more of that feedback," because sometimes I can go out there and I can run through everything as much as humanly possible, and you still miss small things. So we tell the range owners when we push new updates, "Hey, if you see anything, if your range is doing something that looks out of the ordinary, just send it our way and we'll get in and look at it right away." And we've really stayed on top of that. And I think that's been a big advantage of us staying consistent and growing without our customers feeling like they're left alone. And oftentimes, even when we did some of the, we did a large military project in Williamsburg, but half the staff, retired a year after we were there. And so, went back out, and then we retrained everybody. And that was, it was one of those moments where they're like, "Hey, this really helped us, and now we really understand this." So, it's always something that we want to do, and make sure that we're helping people. As long as they have our stuff in, we want to be available.
Well, I tell you, I'm going to tell you a myth that is out there, and you'll recognize it quickly. Anybody who has walked in the door of Vandalia Range and Armory and met your dad or your brothers or any of the staff is going to watch this podcast, and they're going to say, "Well, of course things went fantastic for Alex and Doug and everybody in on the staff. Of course, look at them. They have their ducks in a row. Everything was probably smooth as silk. Nothing jumped out of the bushes at them. There were no surprises." And I think that's a myth, because there's always something that jumps out of the bushes at you that you didn't see coming. Are you able to reference or identify one or two things that you just did not? And it doesn't even have to be in the context of Evolve, and it can be pre 2018, something that jumped out of the bushes at you guys that it really took the entire all hands on deck. We got to solve this problem. We didn't see it coming. How did you work through something like that?
Well, I mean, the most recent thing I could think of is COVID. They shut. We were essential, so we weren't shut down, but we weren't really available as far as the range wasn't open. The store was. Half the staff is sort of in, sort of out. But the big thing with something like COVID, and there's been some other events in our industry that really spike people to go out and purchase. So you're over, I guess, wrong word. You have a ton of people coming in that are new to shooting or new to firearms, never touched a firearm, and and they're all coming at the same time, because there's something that's kind of pushing them that way, whether something they saw or something they felt. And so, that really puts everybody on deck. And then you kind of have to rebound from that, because, you wipe out a lot of inventory, but then it's like starting over. And so it's not, it's not one of those easy things to have a big influx in a month and then try to figure out what to bring in or what not to bring in. And a lot of times stuff's not available. So then it's, how do we keep ammo in for customers that we know they're going to need? So now, do we need to limit this caliber for a while until we can stock back up? Or, can we let them buy more than one box if they want to? There's a lot of strategic stuff that comes in mind with that. And that those things are really difficult when you have those ups and downs. It's much easier to kind of feel like you're building your business from a marketing standpoint, or, you're doing things correctly as a company, as opposed to like, something that causes a huge spike and then you have to recover and figure out how to basically start over sometimes.
I had a conversation with Dave Becker, Miami Armory, and he's a friend. And I'm trying to get him and Austin on the show here sometime. Scotty Cronin is actually coming up here in May. I'm a firearms enthusiast myself, so I'm blessed to have people that can come on and talk about something that I love talking about. Dave Becker talked a lot about the growth spike that I think probably every retail firearms dealer dealt with and some of the struggles. A lot of business owners would sit back and say, oh boy, what a great problem to have. Sales are going through the roof. And when you think about logistics, there really are some things to work through there that aren't always easy. They're either not easily solvable or they're not solved as quick as you'd like them to be.
Yeah, and I mean they typically don't last very long. I mean it might be a 3 or 4 week, 8 week type thing that there's a big push, and then you're kind of figuring out what to bring in or if you can even get it. Those are the struggles. If everybody had the supply that they could deliver, that would be very comfortable, but it doesn't end up being that way. Typically these things start to see themselves forming, and as your inventory leaves, getting back in new inventory is tough, and so you kind of have to strategize a little bit. And I mean, when we were allowed to open the range back up, it was limiting how many rounds someone could buy, and and ammo was a big one that was shorthanded on that. So those things are difficult, but we went through that a couple times, and each time I wouldn't say it's easier, but we do kind of prep. You don't try to get in a hurry, and some guys want to go out and they just purchase everything, and then on the flip side of that, when it stops 7 or 8 weeks later, you don't want to be stuck with a bunch of stuff that you don't want, and so there's a little bit of difficult there, but yeah, I mean that would probably be the most recent struggle there. I mean, outside of just trying to keep people happy and figuring out what they want, and making sure everything's working properly, and setting up your networks and that. Luckily, we've had some great guys that work for us on the development side, and so on the Evolve side, I think we've stayed ahead of that pretty well. But I mean, there's always challenges. Anytime a range calls and said that they've got a minor troubleshooting issue or something, you want to get it taken care of right away. So
You're on the cutting edge there. I mean, you're on the cutting edge with that technology right there. So sometimes and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole right here, but there have to be some unanticipated things that aren't easily solvable when you're on the cutting edge of something of some kind of technology like that right there. You have to be prepared. We had a guest on 2 weeks ago, Patrick Beckel, who runs Beckel's Humidor here, a wildly popular cigar bar here in Centerville. And I asked him, and I'm going to ask you as we kind of start to wind down here. Actually, Tony asked him the question. He said, if you could talk to you, but I get to pick the time. If you're going to go back to the younger Alex and give him some advice, I'm going to pick the time for you. If you could pick when you were just getting into the industry, coming into a family business, but really having some real world responsibility, what would the Alex Hague today tell the younger Alex if he had that opportunity to talk to him back then? What advice would you give yourself?
I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, one, try not to get in too much of a hurry. Sometimes you feel like you want to push yourself forward or push the business forward, maybe before it's ready. So maybe being a little more patient on that end and really working your way up, learning the industry and then branching out. And then, I mean, another thing would probably be kind of embracing that social media and some of the technology on the marketing side, a little earlier. Some of the companies really capitalized on that. I can't say that we jumped into that as much as we should. I mean, we had Facebook and stuff like that, but, some of the guys that really jumped into some of the online sales and stuff, really, really grew quite a bit. So, I would look at that and try to embrace some of that stuff instead of just being focused on, one thing at a time. But, being patient, giving yourself some grace sometimes, you feel like you're grinding away and you need to, take a step back and things are okay. And, how can we grow this sector of the business, and then work out a plan and move forward with it.
I've got two sons that are business owners. And I oftentimes tell them the 6 inches right in here, as a business owner, we're always harder on ourselves than what we should be.
Mm-hmm.
We oftentimes push ourselves past where we should push ourselves. And I like what you said, to give yourself some grace, because entrepreneurs are a different breed. It's a badge of honor that I'm really proud to associate with people that do that. That's why this podcast is so much fun right here. So I'm glad you said that. We're going to jump off here. But one question we always like are the only way that we have hit 50 podcasts and the only way we'll make it to 100 podcasts is by guests referring us to businesses that they think not only that they want to see promoted, because that's the biggest thing right here. I always tell a business owner, I'll get emails like, "Hey, can I get the questions ahead of time?" And I'm like, "You already know all the answers because we're talking about your business, number
Right.
one." But there's so many nuggets to glean from listening to someone like you. You doubled down on the take your time, do it the right way. You said it when we very first started, when you guys rolled out Evolve. It was a use it, repetition. Let's us learn it before we roll it out to anybody else. And then you doubled down on it, get it at the end as advice that you'd give yourself. Can you think of one or two other business owners that our community would benefit from gleaning some knowledge, and also that you would like to see their businesses promoted here on the Ohio Business Spotlight?
Yes, you put me on the spot here. I gotta
It's
really,
always the toughest question. Tony's usually the one that asks it. This time here, I tried to talk a little bit to give those gears a chance to start turning.
geez. I mean, I've been fortunate to know, quite a few here in Vandalia and around Dayton. Try to think of, one. I mean, one interesting person, basically, 'cause I just purchased a car, is the Smedley families in Vandalia. Uh,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Joey and Bo Smedley both are kind of taking over the reins there.
Okay.
So they might be a good group to reach out to, just because I think they're third generation or maybe fourth generation Chevy dealership there. So that would be
I
some.
love that. There's a lot that goes on behind the curtain in a dealership. We had Steve Van Gorder on in one of our earlier episodes. I personally know Steve, so I knew how many plates he had to keep spinning. But just to hear him talk about the empire that he has created, and from the outside it always looks so easy, but Steve spoke from the heart and talked about how difficult. I would be absolutely, I'll hit you up for their contact information.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
actually, one other one that I thought of, because I owe them, probably big time, is Nick Ripplinger at Battle Site Technologies. So they're downtown. If you're not familiar with them, and you would appreciate this, they developed, it's called Crytek, but it's basically almost like a marking system that's for night vision. And so
Okay.
when you mark the walls or you mark the uniforms, it has to be a certain frequency of night vision for you to pick up what they mark. And so they're selling to military institutions and stuff like that. But they really they really helped me out, explaining like the SIVER loans and a lot of DoD contracts. And their place downtown is really impressive, and they're really great guys to deal with. And I would highly recommend getting a conversation with him.
Wow.
And
Well,
he's doing,
I'm gonna
doing a
hit
lot
you
of that.
up. I'll
Yeah.
hit you up in an email after we're done to get that contact information. Those two are fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't get off with telling you how grateful I am that you peeled time. You and I texted. We've been texting now for about 4 weeks trying to
Right.
figure out the date and time. And I'm really thankful that you, number one, took the time out just to share with our community. But number two, kind of just share what it looks like behind an operation that is really at the tip of the spear when it comes to technology, firearms, range. I love it. I'm so very thankful that you took the time, Alex. Thank you for
I
being
really
here, sir.
thank you.
We're going to wrap up this episode right here of the Ohio Business Spotlight. So thankful for our guest today. Excited. Not going to let the cat out of the bag about some names we have coming up that are really exciting. Alex gave me a couple that I'm looking really forward to getting and reaching out to. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button on Follow to Lead. And make sure that you share this podcast when you see it on Facebook or when you see it on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your audience. And this wraps up today. I hope everybody has a great week.
Yep. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.